Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to do my first monthly wrap up and I'm going to wrap up June. In June I read 10 books, 4 of those were physical and the other 6 were all on audio. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with all of the physical books that I read first, and the first book that I read was The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth. This is a suspense book. It is one of those books that you can fly through in 1 or 2 sittings. So it is a perfect beach read, or if you're looking for some type of bingeable book that you can't put down. The Soulmate follows a couple that lives off of the side of a cliff in a small town in Australia. It is an atmospheric read, which I love, which is perfect for summer. It is a suspense because there is a mysterious death that we follow throughout the book, and there are some romantic elements as well, which I personally liked. But this was a very fun read. Perfect if you're looking for something quick. I gave it 5 stars. Next, we have my favorite book that I read in June, and that was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a young adult historical fantasy book, and it is so good. This book was deeply romantic and gave me all of the feels. I loved every second of it. If you are a fan of You've Got Mail and that trope, then you must read this. It is basically like a fantasy retelling almost, with magical letters. It is beautiful, stunning, perfection. Cannot say enough good things. The book follows Iris and Roman, who both work as writers at the Gazette, which is a newspaper in their world. And when one of Iris's letters that's supposed to be sent to her brother accidentally gets sent to Roman instead, the love starts to blossom from there. And I just hope that you guys decide to pick it up, and if you do, please let me know what you think. The next book that I read in June was Only Love Can Hurt Like This by Paige Toon. I actually had an in-depth interview with the author that I uploaded earlier this month, so please check it out if you haven't. Our female main character, Ren, ends up moving to Indiana to live on a small farm with her dad, and there she ends up meeting a guy named Anders, and things start to blossom from there. Anders and Ren have both been through a lot, and they are navigating this time together, and then they end up finding love that is beautiful. But you really need to read it. It is extremely emotional, and I gave it 4 stars. The last physical book that I read in June was Drowning by TJ Newman. And this book is a heart racer. I read this one, and it was my first book by TJ Newman. She has another one called Falling that came out 2 years ago that was also wildly popular. But this book is one of those where you cannot stop reading. You are flying through the pages to see what is gonna happen next. It is about a flight that crashes outside of Hawaii, and they have to do an emergency landing, and when the plane lands in the ocean, 12 passengers end up locking themselves inside the plane, and then that plane sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Once they're there, there is a search and rescue mission going on. We are following multiple perspectives throughout the book, and it is a nail biter. You feel like you're watching a movie when you're reading this book, so I highly recommend 5 stars. And now we'll move on to audiobooks that I read in June, and the first one was The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mickey Brommer, and this one was great. It's set in New York. It is about a death doula, which I had never heard about until reading this book, so I thought that that was very interesting to dive into and to get to know, but it explores a lot of tough topics, obviously, like grief and death, and I really enjoyed it. The audiobook was fabulous, so if you decide to go that route, I would definitely pick it up, but I gave it 4 stars. Next, we had The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda, and unfortunately, this was a miss for me. I read it via audiobook, and I found it quite boring. It was for me to stay invested into the story, and none of the action really happens until the last maybe 10%, and by that point I just was not invested. I think I gave it like a 2.5 stars. Next, I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I read it via audiobook, and this was a unique ride. I really appreciated how creative and fun and fresh it felt, while also being uncomfortable, and you quite literally hate the main character and the narrator throughout the book. So it's definitely an interesting one. I would recommend you giving it a shot. My only gripe that I had with it was after a while it became a bit repetitive. So I wish that there was maybe something else that the author could have brought into it to not feel as repetitive or bring something different to the ending of the story. But overall, it was fabulous. I definitely recommend, and it was 4 stars for me. Next, I read My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, and I am kicking myself. I can't believe it took me this long to read this book because I loved it from beginning to end. It follows a man and his wife, and they are serial killers. It was a compelling read from beginning to end. I could not stop listening to it. I swear I binge read it in like 2 days, so I highly recommend. It was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. After finishing My Lovely Wife, I thought for sure I would be in a reading slump, and I was so nervous to pick up my next read, but I am so glad that I did because I ended up adoring this book. And that book is The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. It was fabulous. I was going into it kind of hesitant because of the cover. It doesn't give you much as far as like context to the story, and I think that's why I kept putting it off. The book follows 2 young Black women in the 1950s. One is college aged, so she is in her 20s, and the other is around 14, so she is in her young formative years. And the story is just so important, and I hope that you all give it a chance and pick it up as well. I personally loved it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. That concludes all the books that I read for June. I'm already getting excited for my July reads. Please comment and let me know what your guys' thoughts are if you've read any of these books. And again, please follow me here and subscribe if you want to stay in the know about what I'm reading and what I'm doing. And you can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Rachel Turns the Page. Bye guys.